Okay, so we as a company, like we are a consultancy company. We specialize in software craftsmanship. So most of the work that is relevant for this talk I've been involved with Agile since the early days, and then I got heavily involved with the software craftsmanship movement. And through the software craftsmanship movement, I end up being very, how can I say, focused on quality and testing, and I ended up writing a book and then talking about software craftsmanship a lot. But what happened was a lot of companies that adopted Agile in the past, they felt that there was something missing, mainly on the engineering side. And because of that, they started looking at software craftsmanship and they wanted to improve their systems, improve their technology, the way that they build software. And Cogenesis today is almost 100 people company. So what happened to us was a bit unexpected in a way, because as companies wanted to adopt better technical practices, the companies that were focused on improving their technical practices, improving their systems, modernizing their technology, they tended to be a little bit larger companies with a very large ecosystem full of very old systems with old technologies. And we had to apply software craftsmanship and techniques from extreme programming and many other things into environments that were difficult, that was not just like a starting from scratch. Because when you are starting from scratch, you don't feel the pain of bad software, right? So you feel when you already have those strategic systems. And almost as an accident, we end up becoming specialized in what today we call software modernization projects, because we were not just trying to change the practices, but also modernizing those systems. So this talk, the idea for this talk came because I believe that most people watching this talk, mainly the ones with a more technical background, we quite often see a lot of issues. We see a lot of things that are not working well, the system is not well designed, or there's no test, and so we see a lot of technical problems. And the people that has more of a business background, they quite often are also frustrated that everything takes a very long time to do. So every feature that they want, it seems for them that takes forever, right? So then we have all these different types of people. All of them seeing different types of inefficiencies in the processes, in the software. But quite often we fail to make a case to fix those things. So how many of us thought many times, why other people don't see those inefficiencies? Why I can't convince them to give us time to refactor these, or give us time to change these, or go to the cloud, or whatever you want to do. So that was the inspiration for this talk. It's like, for anyone that wants to drive technical change, how can you go about that? Because we had to go about that ourselves, right? So for many, many years now, that's what we've been doing. We need, those companies have issues. The people normally speaking to us, they want to drive those changes, but they fail to make a case. They fail to associate a business value to it. And this is why we are calling like a strategic approach to software modernization, right? So first of all, we need to define a little bit of what software modernization is. I want to make a distinction here, is that software modernization, in the context that I'm talking about, is not about those small refactorings or retrofitting some tests. Maybe the system doesn't have tests, so you want to add some unit tests or refactoring. For me, this is part of your normal process, right? As you are working with the software, you have the Boy Scout rule, you are cleaning up bits and bobs, you are adding a few tests here and there. This is for me just the normal part. But for me, when you talk about software modernization, we're talking about something more strategic. It's something that is far more longer term, that is much harder to change. It will have an impact. So normally, and also it cannot be done everywhere. It needs to be very focused. So that's how I like to define. There is a continuous process of improving strategic systems in order to increase business agility, right? So for me, those words, they have a meaning. First of all, it's not a thing that you start and finish. If there is a business that relies on technology, relies on certain systems, they should have a continuous improvement program anyway. And that is focused on the strategic systems that can vary over time as well. As the company evolves, as the business changes, different types of systems or different types of features will become more or less strategic, right? And the goal of changing those things is not just because we want to, right? We need to have a goal in mind, and normally the technology should be powering the business, and that's why the focus on business agility. So I'm trying to emphasize this because for most of us, mainly on the technical background, we want to drive technical change, but we cannot drive technical change if we don't relate what we want to do to business value, and that's what I'll be trying to cover here. So why do we fail to make a case for those changes? If there are so many inefficiencies, so much frustration from so many people, why do we fail to make a case? Quite often, again, I'm not saying that everyone's the same. I'm just reporting here what I see more often, right? So, but very often, when we are trying to drive change, we tend to propose a solution, right? So technical people are very good at of going to business and go with a solution. You need to adopt TDD. You need to re-architect the system. You need to go to the cloud. You need to adopt microservices. And the business has absolutely no clue about all of that, right? Even among ourselves, this is how we also don't agree, even among ourselves, because someone will say, you need to adopt Docker, or you need to do, I don't know, a technology X. We go with solutions. Even for me, Scrum, Agile in general, extreme programming, all those for me, they are means to an end, right? So, but if you want to help people to adopt certain practices, we need to understand what is the value. So I think that this is one of the reasons that we struggle. And for the people like, for example, some heads of departments or product owners, that they are, sometimes they need to make a case to get the budget approval. They can see even the business value, but not in enough depth to make a case to approve the budget. So again, so what is lacking is we need to find a way to align that business technology. So I'm going to give you a few examples, but before we even go into the strategic approach, we need first of all to build a common foundation, that I say. So one of the first things that we need to understand is like, what are the main drivers, right? So that we have for software modernization, right? Because those things, software modernization projects, it will hopefully create what I call a long-lasting impact. They should be strategic things, right? So that's, if you want to drive that change, how do you position that? And there are many different ways to position that. So as we've been working on that for years now in many different projects and companies, the motivations or the drivers, they sort of fit in some of those 6 categories. There might be other categories, but I try to simplify a bit. So those are the common categories that we have as drivers. I'll go into a little bit more details into one of them. Like sustainable change, for example, a common problem that we see everywhere is a lot of waste in the process. Like for people like, this is a Flowcon, so I believe that a lot of people are into lean and Kanban and stuff, so and value stream mapping. So there is a lot of waste in the process. So one of the drivers for software modernization is to create the sustainable change. In order to create sustainable change, you need to optimize your process. And then you need to reduce technical debt, you need to reduce the cost of change, right? So you need to reduce the lead time. So, and for that, you need to automate repeatable process, you need to apply, to have a more modular architecture. So it's important to understand when you are trying to drive a change, what is the driver? What is the kind of business value? So sustainable change is a very, very common one. So innovation. So a lot of companies, they lost the ability to innovate. So they complain, for example, we cannot build a feature fast enough. And there are also, we are realizing that there are different types of innovation. So for example, companies that are more on the lean startup approach, let's say they have a very innovative product or feature, right? So, but it's a new market. It's not an area that is very easy to do user research. You just need to push it out as fast as you can, collect feedback, and then inspect and adapt, right? So you build something quick, push it out, get data, understand the data, adapt. So in order to do that, you need to design your systems to enable that. Your systems need to be designed in a way where experiments are easy. And you don't normally experiment across your entire system, mainly in large organizations. You might isolate one area where you are experimenting, which means that that area needs to be designed or re-architected or even modernized in a way to enable that speed. This is the same for more experimentations in more stable products. For example, we work with a lot of large organizations where they have a very well-defined set of clients. So before they release a feature, they do some user research, they speak to their clients, they figure out what are the core features that their clients are waiting for. So, and then they keep releasing one after another. But in order to have that cadence and keep innovating their product, but with more certainty, you also need to design your system or modernize your system in a way that is possible, because different from the other one, as you this more let's say design thinking approach and stuff, your system needs to be flexible because it needs to keep changing, but it needs to be robust because every time that you push a feature, it needs to be stable because it's going straight to clients. It's not just experimental. So again, when you are driving change, is innovation one of the drivers? Because you need to match that your change to that driver. Leverage technology. For example, a lot of companies have large data centers. They have like, or they have a lot of departments doing work in a very not very, how can I say, sustainable way or efficient way. So there are a lot of technologies going to the cloud, or automating your pipelines, or orchestrating your containers, or being able to spin off new environments. So you can leverage technology. So this is also one type of modernization where you can modernize your technology in order to enable some business drivers. So business alignment. So this is also key because different areas of the business, they evolve at different paces. So your system needs to be modernized in a way where your architecture matches the different types of areas or functional areas that you have in a business. In domain-driven design, we're going to talk about bounded contexts. So those bounded contexts, they need to match the functional areas of the organization. As the organization evolves, sometimes the architecture of your system will be misaligned, will lose that connection. So a modernization may also allow you to create that alignment and then decouple those initiatives within the areas. People and culture. So this is a thing that not many people talk about, but quite a lot of companies struggle to recruit. So they struggle to hire and they struggle to retain talent. So for a technology company, it's essential that you hire good people and you retain them, but you cannot do that using very old technologies that are proprietary and things like that. So it needs to be appealing for good people to come to your organization and stay. So that is an investment that you need to keep maintaining. So evolving your technology stack and modernizing technology stack and architectural patterns and everything else also has a significant impact on the people that you recruit and retain. And also there are like things like risk management. So we work with a lot of regulated companies in regulated environments, in pharmaceuticals, in investment banking, and insurance and stuff like that. So there is a lot of compliance, security, operational excellence, so observability of systems in production. So not always, as the regulations are changing, you need to modernize your systems in order to make it easier to be compliant with the regulations or certification, so on and so forth. So So this is part of the foundation. You need to understand before you drive a change, what impact the change that you want to drive will have in the business. Where does it fit? So, but then there is also the impediments. The other side of this is like, what would block, even if you make that case, or we are going to improve certain areas of the business, but what could be the impediments? Lack of time, lack of money, the two most common ones, right? Those things are relative, right? So time and money is relative. You don't have time compared to what? Because, for example, they might say that they don't have time, but if they have a lot of inefficiencies in their process, you can make a case to say, look, we are saying that we don't have time, but we spend like 3 months just with the QA cycle, with manual QA, every time you want to release a version of your system. Or we have so many bugs coming back from QA, so there's a lot of rework. Or there are tons of cycles of improvements, or we need to change 5 different systems in order to get something out. So there is a lot of time that is going in places that is just pure waste. And if we could reduce that, you would have more time to do something more important. Money is exactly the same thing, but you have other things. You have lack of skills, you have fear of increasing risk, you have like some companies have tried to modernize certain things and they failed, so now they're burnt, they don't want to do it. So you need to understand, I'm not going to go through all of them, but you need to understand your stakeholders and understand what are their main concerns. So when you are making that case, you need to address those things, right? And also, everything that becomes like a name, like agile and craftsmanship and lean, people start having different interpretations. So modernization is the same. You need to be able to explain what you mean by that as well. So first, there are for me some principles that will guide any modernization effort. For me, like, you need to have a big vision. So in order to convince someone to do something meaningful, strategic, not just do a small improvement here and there that in the great scheme of things is not going to be significant. So you need to sell a vision. You need to have a good vision to say, like, look, we can be much better in 1, 2, 3 years time, right? So you need to have a vision, but you need to work in small increments, and every increment needs to have value, right? Another very important thing, a modernization normally will disrupt business as usual. Right, so because you'll be re-architecting systems, you're going to be rejuggling things around and change how data is manipulated or how systems are deployed, and so there is a disruption. So in your plan, you need to try to maximize as much as possible. Say that you can completely avoid disrupting business as usual. I cannot say that. There's always some disruption, but you need to keep it minimal. If it's not broken, so don't touch things that are working. If it's working and it's not in the critical path, it's not going to be strategic moving forward. It doesn't matter if you like the code or not, if you like the technology or not. If it's not changing, not strategic, not moving, not essential moving forward, leave it be. Excellence within pragmatic solutions is also quite important. Quite often, mainly technical people like me and probably some of you, we want, if we have an opportunity, we want everything to be excellent and perfect. But these end up, we lose pragmatism. We want everything to be perfect because we are focusing on the technology, we are focusing on the solution that we want, but we lose sight of what is important to the business. So what I always say is, like, excellence should be bounded. You cannot just have excellence being unbounded, because you lose pragmatism. There's never return on investment. So you need to have a pragmatic solution where excellence exists within, right? So, and then there's the law of diminishing return. We need to learn at this stage, at this level, the strategic level, we cannot go too deep. There's no point in keep adding tests, and trying to add unit tests for millions and millions and millions of lines of code. At some point, you say, you know what, this area is more important than the other area. Let's focus in here and do what is good enough, because it's the whole Pareto's law. Maybe with a 20% investment, we can get an 80% return, but to get the last 20% return, we need to invest the other 80%. So we need you to be careful that at some point you say, this is good enough. So this is for me the foundation, right? So before you try to drive any change, you need to understand all of those things. And then with that foundation, now we can say, okay, so how can we start? There is, I simplify in 5 approaches. Normally, these can be done if you are able to get the right people. And who are the right people? Your sponsors, representatives of the business, representatives of technology. From business and technology can have different roles as well. And the technology can have people from operations, from QA, from architects, team leads, whoever. Business, the same thing. You can have people from sales, from marketing, from account managers or whoever, right? So you need to get those people together. We normally are able to do the things that I'm going to mention until the end of the presentation in a few days, right? In a week, in 2 weeks, sometimes in 3 days, depending on how much time we have. So this is not like a big thing. It's a lot of things that I'm going to cover, but it's not as big in terms of time as long as you know what you're doing. So first thing we need to do, align the business, right? You align the business, align technology, create a vision, create a strategy to start going to that vision, and then you say, okay, but how are we going to do each one of those steps? That is the implementation. So that is, in a nutshell, that is it. How do we do the business alignment? So first of all, we need to understand what are we trying to achieve. As I said, there were the drivers before, and you can be a little bit more specific. What is the strategic value? Are we tackling inefficiencies? Are we doing experimentation? So we need to agree as a group, what is the criteria that you're going to have, the business criteria, the business goals for the modernization. Another thing we need to do, we need to focus, right? So those organizations that want to invest in modernization, they don't have one system, they have loads of systems, they have loads of departments. And so you cannot just say you're going to modernize everything, because that's not going to work. You need to focus. So what are the key areas that we should focus on that are core to our business? This is a very high level exercise that we've done with a 5,000 people company with their senior management. We were able in a few days to map out 16 functional areas of their business. And within those 16, we chose 3 that were more important. And each one of them were broken down into far more areas. We had like 3 levels of breaking down areas. And then within those areas, we end up focusing in certain key areas. So then you can really focus your modernization approach in where it matters. So that is still the alignment. Now that you have the focus, now that you have the business areas that you want to focus on, and everything else, if one day you get there, great, but you focus on what is important. There are areas that you'll never touch, right? So once you have those areas, what are the main features? What are the pain points, the desired improvements? So it's fascinating to run those workshops with those different people, with the technology, the business, the sponsors and stuff. And you say, okay, so in this area, in this product, what are the key things that this thing do, right? Oh, this thing does. Each one of them will have a different view in terms of what are the main features, the main activities that the area performs. And the pain point's the same. Each one of them, because they look at the systems and the business model from different perspectives, they also have a different view of their pain points. And because they see different features as main features and different pain points, they also have different desired improvements. So bringing them together and running those workshops, we will align them of what is really important, what is really a pain point, and what we really should act on. Because some certain pain points, so yeah, it's a pain. You need to learn how to live with that, right? So because we have much bigger pains to focus on, right? So this is part of the alignment. And one of for me, the most important exercises to run is what we call a value stream mapping, right? Again, not everyone, and we've done a lot of those workshops, like a value stream mapping, for those of you that don't know, is just mapping from idea to software in production. What are all the steps? What happens from someone that has an idea until it's deployed in prod? This is one result of a workshop that we ran. There were 7 people, I think, from the client, from different areas, like, but all looking at the same systems. We ran like for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and by the end of it, because each one, for example, we had like the business analysts or product owners, they had their own process of prioritizing ideas and backlogs and assigning to teams and stuff. They had their own process, budget approvals. I don't expect, by the way, that you read all those post-its, right? So, and then there were loads of things. As soon as it gets to development, there are different people, there are different departments, and there is separate QA. And so when we finished, each person was contributing different parts. When we finished, all of them looked at us like, is this how we work? I said, yes. And no one had the full visibility. So this exercise allows to bring everyone together and be very precise where the inefficiencies are. Because then you can say, okay, we need to automate this bit, we need to re-architect the system, or you know what, you just need to fix your process. You don't need to change anything in the technology. You just need to find a more, how can I say, a better way of communicating and removing some of bureaucracy that God knows why is there. There are a few things missing as well, because we also need to look forward. So sometimes they will have a portfolio management, so they know what they want to achieve in each quarter, all the different initiatives or strategic initiatives that you're going to have in your portfolio. Or if you're looking at something that is a little bit more focused, they might have some milestones or backlogs and stuff like that. So we need to know what is coming next, because as I said, we should not be modernizing things that are not useful in the future. There's no point in touching one area if there's no new feature coming in. So leave it be. So just all the modernization should support the strategy of the business. So whatever we do now should it be to enable the strategic vision of the business to be implemented. And then there are constraints as well. We didn't look at it, but we need to look at it. For example, SLAs, regulations, certifications, external and internal deadlines. So all of those things, they impact the modernization. So we need to understand what are constraints that we cannot do anything about. If there is a certification, a regulation, an external deadline, it doesn't matter how much we hate them, we need to suck it up, right? So it is what it is. Whatever we do, let's create a strategy that will take that into account. And we'll do our best within those constraints. Other constraints we might decide to remove, and then we need to have a conversation. But we need to keep that in mind. OKRs, KPIs, metrics is also, again, related to the portfolio. So what does the business want to achieve and stuff, because you need to align your strategy to that, right? So, and basically a few metrics are always important. Again, different modernization styles will have different metrics, but there are 4 key metrics. For those of you that that didn't read the Accelerate book, I highly recommend. It's a phenomenal book. And it explains the research behind it. It's all based on data and stuff. But they talk about 4 key metrics. That is the frequency that you deploy software, the lead time, so the time it takes from to software to go to production. If something goes wrong, how fast can you restore that? And the amount of waste, or in this case, in failures that you have in the process, right? As the work is going through the pipe, how much failure do we have? We should be reducing that. So those are key indicators that you can use to monitor your modernization approach as well. So with that, by the end of those, and again, you can run through those things. If people are available, you can do that in one day, by the way. I'm not talking about months. No, it's one day you probably can get some alignment. Once we have that, now we need to go to the technical side of it. The technical side, we start looking, okay, within the areas that we are focusing on, what is the current architecture? What do we have? So, and then as we look at the overall architecture, then we need to decide where we're going to go a little bit deeper. Then you need to look at some of the components, some of the services, what is the overall design, and also what we call it a functional mapping. So, for example, if we have a few features, and by features I'm not only talking about users clicking on screen. A lot of organizations don't even have screens. What they have is messages coming from different systems, coming from outside the company. So messages coming in and navigating through a bunch of systems, or they have different delivery mechanisms and UIs and stuff. So, but we need to take those features, whichever they are, and map. As soon as our systems are triggered, what happens? Which other systems are touched? Which areas of the systems are touched for each one of those systems? So you can do that mapping as well. So this allows us to create an understanding. And this exercise is done not only with technical people. This exercise is done with the business people on the same room, in the same room as well, because they themselves don't understand how our systems are architected. And because those workshops are at the high level, it's easy for them to understand. We are not going to be opening Java classes or Clojure or some crazy JavaScript framework. That is not at the level. This is at the design, architecture design level. That's where the strategy is at that level, not on the low-level coding issues. So this allows the business people to understand the kind of complexity that we have and how the system is mapped. So then we do a very similar thing. What are the pain points? What are the desired improvements, technical constraints? And we also talk about the risks for modernization, because in certain environments, maybe in regulated environments, environments that have too many concurrent users buying things or prescribing medicine and stuff like that, you cannot just start hacking the code or hacking the architecture and changing things around and changing APIs and changing databases. You need to understand what are the risks. So there is a whole session on risks as well. So then you look at constraints, for example. We work with one client where they are a healthcare provider. Their systems they have more than 11,000 production installations. 4,000 of them are on-premise, on environments that we don't even have access to. Right, that is controlled by other people, by their clients. So, because they cannot be multi-tenants, what does it mean? Well, multiple clients can access the same production instance. They need to have one instance per client. Because if one system goes down, one hospital might go down, but not the entire American health system goes down. So, because they need to be multi-instance and not multi-tenant. That created a very big technical constraint in the architecture that we have. We cannot go microservices, for example, because otherwise, imagine like 11,000 production installation, and we put, I don't know, 50 microservices in each one of those installations. The complexity would be gigantic on top of the 4,000 on-premise. So we had to go for what we call a modular monolith. But this is just one example of technical constraints. But you have SLAs, you have regulations, you have volume of data, you have many other things, right? So again, that we all need to understand. Not only technical people, but the business people need to understand. Once we have that alignment with business and technology, only then we start to create a vision. We say, okay, so given what we know now of where we are in the business and the technology, what are the pain points, what we want to improve, and so on and so forth. What is our vision? And here I call the magical wand, right? So if you have a magical wand, you can say, bling, and see this beautiful future ahead of you with all the systems using the technology that you want, split the way that you want, and the process being whatever you want, all the automation. So let's paint that picture. Let's try to understand what we would like to have. Of course, we will never have that. Most of the time, we will paint a vision that you will never achieve. But it needs to serve as a guide. So I always say that technical vision is a direction. It's not a plan that you follow. It needs to give guidance. It's okay, this is what we would love to have. But we cannot stop the whole world or be spending money forever and time forever chasing a vision. Again, we need the pragmatic solutions with excellence, right? So you create the vision to serve as a direction, and then you start moving towards that. right? So it is not going to be a straight path. So each increment is going to go a little bit on the side, maybe a little bit on the side, and we keep recalibrating, we keep recreating the vision. As we walk towards the vision, is it still the same vision, or is it changed? Is it moving to the side? And then you keep adjusting, right? So, and we will be talking about the testing strategy, the technology, the deployment, production environment, modernization, team ownership. Team ownership is very, very, very important. I'll probably talk more a little bit later. If I don't, send me a question. We can talk more about team ownership as well. But you need to create that vision, right? And in that, you need to take into account all the constraints, business and technicals, priorities, OKRs, and so on and so forth. So it sounds obvious, but I'm yet to see when people are trying to drive technical change, if they have this aligned and this plan. That's why we normally are not able to do that. So once we have the vision side is where people get excited, right? So you as a change agent, you as a person that wants to drive the change, you need to excite people. You bring them along. When you bring them along, they now are all in the same place. They all verbalize their pains, their desires and stuff. And now things are getting together. And then you are together creating that vision. And at that point, it's your job to make sure that everyone is excited. And now they will say, you know what, this might be actually possible. But like, well, up until now, we just talked about desires and pain points. We create this beautiful vision, but I'm still skeptical. Like, can we even get there? And I'm not seeing these actually being implemented. And that's when highly technical people can really shine, because now is our time to say, okay, we created this excitement. Now let's see how we can do that in a way that is sustainable. And I'm not going to prescribe, because it's impossible for me to prescribe what would be the strategy without knowing the context. So I'm going to give you ideas. This slide shows the most simplistic approach to software modernization. This came from Gartner, which I personally think that there are great things in there, and some things that Gartner loves to show those reports that are very simplistic in nature. So Gartner says, oh, there are different types of modernization. There is a rewrite, re-platform, re-architect, refactor. So that's what they talk about. There are one or two that were a bit too weird for me. But anyway, this is for me very simplistic, because most of the modernization projects that we've been involved, they were a hybrid of all of that. There's a bit of everything in there. So let's forget this, because this is way too simplistic to talk about software modernization. We divided in slightly different ways, because as I said, you cannot change everything. So one strategy, those are more modernization strategies that have some business impacts. One way of doing that is to say which functional area of your business is more critical, either is causing you a lot of pain and you need to stop the bleeding, you need really to fix that so that you can focus in other things more important, or is very critical to the future and is not ready to enable what you want to do. So that is a focus on a functional area, right? So another way of doing that, you know where you want to touch, but you cannot stop business as usual. And you don't have enough people or time or resource or whatever to do that. So what you can do, this is an approach we used a few times. You can take, I'll give a concrete example, the new features one. We were working with this client, and they had a big monolith in their online store where payment was part of the monolith. So the monolith had like orders, products, catalog, all the common domains that you might imagine, including payment. So the payment side was complicated because they were storing credit cards, which means that the entire system had to be PCI compliant. So every change that we wanted to make, even if you were changing the catalog, they might need to keep PCI compliance, which was not even changed, but it had to go through auditing. And so what we wanted to do, we wanted to decouple the deployment cycle. If we could remove payments from the rest of the monolith, we could allow the rest of the code base to be deployed much faster and with less bureaucracy, and keep the more bureaucracy or more auditing and stuff where it really matters, that is the payments. But we could not just stop everything to do that. So what we did, we used new features. They wanted to add new payment methods. They had already a few credit cards, but they wanted to add PayPal, they wanted to add Apple Pay and stuff like that. So what we've done, we took the new payments. In fact, they were actually, in this case, they were integrating with a payment gateway from Turkey. So we said, okay, let's take the payment gateway integration. So we created a vision, and we used a new feature in the system, but we designed a new feature with the new architecture, with the new vision. And that allowed us to still progress towards the business and start introducing the new vision for that area. And then gradually we start moving the existing payment methods into the new system. So that is a very interesting way of doing. There is business flows. Business flow, for example, another company, they had 300 employees that in order to do their operations, they were very inefficient because they had to use 3 different systems to do their normal business flows, and quite often they had to copy data from one system to another so that they continue the flow because they acquired different companies, so on. So what we've done, we took the business flows and we based our modernization approach in the flow that the users needed. And then we chose what we had to decouple, what we had to rewrite, what we had to create another service, and so on and so forth. But that was tailored to that business flow. I'm not going to go into all of them, but I'm just giving you ideas that when you are modernizing, the way that you create your strategy can vary significantly, but you are always tailoring that to the business. And then there is a more technical approach. Then there is the actual architecture that you're going to use or stuff. So, for example, I mentioned the modular monolith a little bit earlier. So given the constraints that we had and the needs from the business, architecturally wise, our biggest software modernization project today, the system is a modular monolith, and it's going to remain a modular monolith, right? So because it makes sense. But you can go from microservices, or you can use a stronger fig, or you can have modernizations that are based in separation front end and back end. Or, for example, you have a bunch of microservices, but you have different delivery mechanisms. You might have mobile, you might have the web, you might have integration with other systems that use your system, so consumers of your APIs. So who manages the flow? The business flow, the user journey. So then you can also organize your systems in a way and push the flow to the delivery mechanisms, because then the mobile flow can be different from the web flow, that can be different from another system that interfaces with APIs. So, but that's an architectural decision. So data segregation, data ownership. So who owns the data? Which areas of the systems will own the data? Which data the system own? And what do I mean by own? Data that they can change, they can insert, they can delete, they can update. So who owns products? Who owns orders? Who owns, I don't know, catalog? And who needs the data? Who consumes the data? So that organization is extremely important in how you architect your system. So there are techniques and architectures for that as well. And then there is a modularization. All the types of software modernization efforts we had a degree of modularization. And by modularization, I'm not saying like modules is a conceptual term, right? But eventually you need to modularize separate areas. And this is a very difficult thing to do in larger systems. There are many different variables, and depending on how you look at your system, or from which perspective that you look, you might come up with a different type of module, or the boundaries between modules. So there are many different techniques that you can use: the data, the functional mapping, the areas, the functional areas of the business. There are many different perspectives that you need to analyze in order to decide where the bounded context, if you want to be more domain-driven design technical term, or the functional areas in order to get that split. But there are many advantages. And so the modularization, I know that sounds obvious, but for technical people, so of course you need to modularize. Of course that you need to have things that are loose coupled, that is highly cohesive, and of course you do that. But why? Right? So how do you talk about that with someone else that is not a developer, right? Or not an architect? So there is a reduction in cognitive load. Every time that you go to a place, an area of the system, you can think about that area without having to have the entire system in your head. And that is not only on the technical side, on the business side as well. If you can match the functional areas to the bounded context, you have that reduction of cognitive load when you are talking about those areas. And of course, that if you have that, you can also have localized and safer chains. That's another drive. So when you go to someone, you want to drive the change, you don't go just say, I need to modularize my system. Why? Because it makes sense for me as a developer, right? Because it's easier. No, because you can localize and make change safer, right? So we can enable parallelization of work. So if the system is modular, I can have multiple chains going at the same time without affecting each other, as long as the way that those modules interface with each other remains the same, or their interfaces, right? So it's easier to achieve continuous delivery, because this is another misconception. Continuous delivery doesn't mean that you need to release your entire system every day or all the time. You can release different parts of your systems continuously. So one day you release a feature in payments, another one you release in the customer side, another. So you are constantly releasing things, and they are coming from different areas. So that's what can give you continuous delivery. So as I'm saying, like, there are many different ways for you to express the things that you know that are wrong with the system, but in a more business way, let's say. And there are different types of modules, right? Modules can be all the way low level, from packages and namespaces to components, to libraries, to services, groups of services. So our payments area, as I was saying before, is a module of the system at architecture level. And that module of the system is composed by a few services. Each one of those services have their own modules inside, and so on and so forth. So that modularization, it exists in multiple levels, similar to architecture and software design. You architecture all the way from the very top in different areas, and then you go deeper and deeper until you get to classes and methods, or functions if you prefer, right? So all of that needs to be is part of your technical strategy. And then finally you have, okay, so now we understand what the vision is, the pain points, all the alignment and stuff, and we know we have a strategy, we have a vision, and we have a little bit more concrete what needs to happen. So how do we go about that? How do we use our people, right? So how do we go about that? There are many different ways. All of them have pros and cons, as everything we do, right? There are always pros and cons, and then you need to understand your context and what would work best. So, for example, one way that you can do, you have a dedicated team just to do that modernization bit, or at least parts of it. You might have more than one team to do different parts of the modernization exercise, the modernization strategy. What is the advantage of having a dedicated team just doing that? You can get that done faster, because you can assemble a team that has the skills that you need, because some organizations might be moving to the cloud, might be upgrading technologies, or might be breaking an old monolith apart, so you need people with knowledge of that monolith, and not necessarily knowing the latest technology, but more of a domain knowledge, of system knowledge. So you can assemble the team according to what you're trying to do, and that team will blaze ahead. So you might achieve that faster. So there is advantage on that. The disadvantage is that that knowledge is a bit concentrated. So after the team blazes ahead, you need to find a way to spread that knowledge across other teams as well. And also this team will need to interface with a lot of teams potentially as well. There are specialized teams. You can just bring a few people. It's like, okay, those are cloud specialists. They are AWS specialists, or they are I don't know, they understand everything about this domain. They built this thing 15 years ago, right? So then you build a very specialized team. It's not a cross-functional team, and they will take a very specialized area. Other companies prefer to unify the backlogs. They have a backlog that has business as usual, new features, and technical improvements. Advantage, yeah, you can do both. You don't stop the entire business. You share the knowledge. The same team that is doing the new features is also the ones that are fixing the issues, but it's going to be far slower. And more often than not, the new features will always take precedence, right? So you can embed some specialists, you can have 20% improvements. So there are many different configurations. I'm not going to go into each one of them. If you want to know more, pop up the question and then I will go in more details. But as I said, there are many different ways for you to arrange your teams. And there is also a great book. I think that one of the authors gave a talk in this conference not a few days ago. That is the guy that wrote the team topology. So that book is really, really good. I think one of the authors spoke here. Have a look at that book because it gives very, very good insights in how to align those teams. Every modernization needs to be run as an agile project. It needs to have an incremental approach. It needs to have roadmap and milestones. So do demos regularly and show progress. You need to figure out a way to show progress. And we've been doing those projects for a long time now. At the beginning, it was very difficult to figure out how I'm going to talk about a piece of refactoring that I'm doing or an API that I'm changing or, I don't know, some cache that I'm putting somewhere. How do I explain that to the business? Well, there are many different ways. You just need to find a way. I cannot give examples, but you can talk about performance. You're improving. You do demos. See, this is the so this is without the cache. That's how long it takes. Now we have the cache. It takes much faster. So you can show metrics in Sonar, in Code Scene, and stuff like that. So there are many different ways, but you need to show the business value. So that's a summary. So those are a few areas. So as I said, if you want to drive a technical change, you cannot just go there and say, we need to do microservices. And I need 1 year to do that with a team of 10 and it's going to cost £1 million. Forget it, you're not going to convince anyone. And you cannot just be upset, oh, I don't know why they don't listen to me. They don't understand, they're always stupid people. They cannot see what I'm saying. Because it's the solution, you're not aligning, you're not mapping to the value. And there are different ways in doing, I'm not going to cover these to a big degree, but large organizations, they might want to trigger multiple initiatives, and we are running some of those things in certain clients. You can scale that, but you also need to be careful. So in a way, we talk about this continuous improvement program. So basically, you can have like multiple initiative sources. So those are different functional areas of the business, or it might be some different groups like QA, operations, or a specific task force like root cause analysis and CAPA, that is corrective action, preventive action. Some companies create those areas to act on some immediate issues that they are having. So they are all different types of different sources of initiatives, of improvement initiatives, and they can present a case to what we call a steering group. This steering group will understand the business value of tackling those things. They will create a very high level backlog that is more like a portfolio of initiatives, and then they can decide what kind of teams are going to be working on those things, and what is the amount of work in progress, right? So how many improvement initiatives are going to have at some point in time. Remember that those initiatives, they tend to be long. They tend to be measured in months, if not a year. So they are more expensive, they are more strategic. So you don't want too many of them because you may destabilize the entire system. So you need to be very careful. This is why the steering group is important, because the steering group is not only by sponsors that can pay for it, but all the technical architects, if you have them, or whoever the technical people is, the CTO, the head of engineering, whoever, because they need to understand the technical risks of doing certain things in parallel. And then the teams, they can decide. They can assemble a brand new team just for a single initiative. And once that initiative is done, the team goes back to whatever they were doing next. Or they can have a few teams dedicated to the CIP, right, the continuous improvement program, that they are taking one initiative after another, assuming that they have the skills to do so. Or they can bring a team from a department, the department joins, does that initiative and goes back, right? So you can have multiple combinations. So I'm not going into the detail. There are different types of initiatives, tactical, strategic, but this is a way to try to scale modernization programs. And ultimately, what you want to achieve is this alignment. You want to align the product and software design. By product is any system that is strategic. It's not necessarily a product that is going out to an external customer. I'll treat an internal system that is strategic as a product in this case. But what you want is to align, because those strategic systems, business-wise, normally, they will have a roadmap, they have milestones, which means that the business is planning for them. Business-wise, there is a plan for them. And as they are, the team is iterating, the business is adjusting that plan, adjusting those milestones, adjusting the priorities in the backlog. But what we don't do is, this is strategic on the ideation, strategy, and planning that normally happens in the product level. We do that at the product level, but we don't do it at the technology level. So as they are creating the definition of the product, as they are discussing roadmaps and changing roadmaps, as they're discussing milestone, we should be working together to say, okay, so if I understand what you're trying to do, I can say if it's feasible. What is the technical feasibility of it? Do we need to buy a system? Do we need to integrate? How many systems are going to be changed? Do we need a different technology? So how much is going to cost, at least in the ballpark, in terms of not only buying licenses or stuff, but also development effort. Of course, we won't do estimates at that level, but you can have a high a ballpark. Here we are talking about 6 months, maybe this is a year-long, maybe 2 years program. So you can give that ballpark just to start. Once we have more clarity of the roadmap, then it's okay. If that's our roadmap for the next 6 to 12 months, business-wise, does our architecture support that? Do we have an architecture that can support that? Or we need to adjust our architecture or create a new architecture to support that roadmap? And as we are iterating, we also need to make sure that we are making strategic decisions in the technical level. And as we go to the milestones and the increments, or if you don't like increments, user stories or whatever, we also need to start refining the low-level design. The problem is that those, the green boxes on the ideation, strategy, and planning, they normally don't happen. They normally, it's done at the top for the business, but the technology gets involved once the backlog is already created, and the teams are normally working on the top items of the backlog. So that's normally how I see a lot of the agile implementations. There's a lot of thinking in the product, but the teams, their interaction with the business is, what are the top levels of the backlog? Okay, so how do we split that in an iteration? And then they are working on iteration level. Because they work on the small, they cannot do any significant architectural change or create an architectural or a technical strategy when they are just iterating one after another and don't have the full visibility, because those decisions, they need to be made as the business is adjusting the portfolio and the roadmap. So that's what we want to achieve. And for that, if you are starting from scratch, it's easy. But if you have a bunch of legacy code, you will need to start modernizing your systems to provide that alignment. So that's what I wanted to share with you. So hope that was useful. But yeah, so this is how things that you should think about if you are considering to drive change.